Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Lindmark, and I am the AVP of Special Events at San Diego State University. On behalf of the CSU Event Professionals Network Executive Council, it's my pleasure to welcome each of you to our third day of our 9th annual conference. It's hard to believe this is the 9th year. So whether you're attending for the first time or you've participated in previous conferences, we hope you find today's content valuable. Before we begin, I want to share some information about the Event Professionals Network. The CSU-EPN was founded in 2012, and the first meeting was held on our campus here at San Diego State. And the event professionals from across the CSU system attended this workshop, and it was really just to share best practices, discuss challenges and opportunities, but most importantly, just to get to know each other. It was such a rewarding experience that it was decided to formalize the group and host an annual conference, which would take place at different CSUs, throughout the CSU system each year. So the Executive Council was formed, and a few years later, to provide infrastructure and to ensure the network continued to pay it forward for each of those campuses that were hosting the new conference. With the pandemic and with the ongoing support of the CSU Advancement Academy, the 2020-2021 academic year ended up being another year of growth for our network. So in the last year, we reached and maintained a 100% participation from all 23 CSU campuses, as well as representatives from the UCs and private institutions. So the names of the Executive Council representatives are all listed right here on your screen. If you're interested in serving on the Executive Council, please feel free, or any of the subcommittees, which we have many of, please feel free to contact our great friend, Phyllis Grello, or contact your campus representative. So the CSU EPN has many resources to keep the network connected, including a listserv where you can opt in to receive updates from the network. It's also a great resource where you can post questions or ask for advice. You literally have the expertise of hundreds of event professionals right at your fingertips. We encourage you to connect with us on social media by joining the CSU EPN Facebook, LinkedIn group, or following us on our brand new Instagram. You can explore the recordings of previous CSU EPN programming on our YouTube channel, and the links to all of these outlets can be found in your conference emails. And please share the fun of this year's conference by using the hashtag CSU-EPN21. Now in its second year, the CSU EPN Awards program has expanded to have 2 new awards. In addition to the Founders Award and the Beyond the Call of Duty Award, the categories now include the MVP, the most professional or most valuable professional, and the Rising Star. All 4 of these awards will be conferred on day 4 of our conference on July 29th. We look forward to seeing you at this award ceremony. Now I want to thank our summer series sponsors, Iconic Group, our platinum sponsor, Marching Order, Sjsu, the Commencement Group, and Chameleon Creative. Your support has really enhanced our conference. I now want to welcome to the stage Doug Weiland to make a few remarks on behalf of the Iconic Group.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm Doug Weiland, Sales Manager for the Iconic Group, Grad Images, and Balfour. Here we are in week 3 of our conference. As a follow-up, yes, I'm still in Arizona. Yes, it's still a dry 110 degrees. And yes, I'm still waiting for my invitation to visit one of you on the coast. Today, we're talking about marketing, how to reach students, how to communicate with them in the most efficient manner, how to help that helicopter parent best inform their student as to what is happening. How many times have we heard from the graduating senior, I didn't get that email, or I've not gotten any of the 10 previous emails you sent me about time-sensitive materials? Or the best, deadline? What do you mean the deadline is passed? My mom is gonna kill me. So today we're gonna discuss the different ways to communicate with students, faculty, and other members of the campus community, as well as how to most efficiently get your message where it's intended to go. It's not just sending a letter anymore or an email. As we have learned, most college students rarely check their emails. It's all about face place, tic-tac, and Insta moment. I think that's what they're called, right? I'm just kidding. I still love my MySpace, although my account has been pretty quiet lately. Seriously, today's marketing is much more complex than it was just a minute ago. As soon as we learned Facebook, they switched to Instagram. So we learned Instagram and TikTok was born. So what's next? Today, your panel will discuss the latest trends, ideas, and best practices. As for the Iconic Group, we recognize the ever-changing world and have established a team of marketing professionals whose only job is to ensure we are delivering the correct message to the correct people to maximize our efforts and success. Many of you that are partners with Grad Images and Balfour have had a little taste of what our teams can do for you. We are the only company that has a dedicated team providing customized and targeted marketing strategies. Grad Images has created a suite of assets we call our marketing toolkit for all of our partner clients. We are constantly seeking to leverage the best, most current, and relevant means of communication with graduates and their loved ones, while at the same time delivering a pleasant and non-pressured user experience. With that, I'll turn it back over to Chris. Enjoy your day, and please come visit us in our booth. It's lonely out in cyberspace when no one is to talk to. Have a good day.
Thank you, Doug. That's a hard act to follow. So lastly, before we begin today's content, I want to share that the CSU EPN is committed to bringing event professionals within our higher education system together to develop industry best practices, share event ideas, and really to support one another. Membership is open to event professionals within the CSU-UC and at private higher educational institutions in California. Membership is free, so please help us grow by spreading the word among event professionals on your own campus. And now I'll hand the show back over to my colleagues to begin today's session.
Thank you, Chris and Doug. I really appreciate you guys opening up today's session with a little bit of levity and warmth. Hi again, everyone. My name is Sam Camarena. I'm the manager of the CSU Advancement Academy, and I'll be the moderator of today's panel. The kind of reason we're holding this is to give a little bit of insight into some of the phenomenon that's happening right now in the events industry. There's obviously an increased volume of virtual events over the last few months, and audiences are now inundated with multiple event offerings, sometimes concurrently. As a result, event professionals now need to develop effective marketing plans for their events to win audience attention and participation in what has become, again, a crowded market. This panel of social media managers and digital marketing experts from across the CSU will share some marketing best practices, tips for how to leverage your campus communications team, and we will try to dispel some misconceptions about social media. The panel aims to provide some strategies and resources to help you develop an effective social media marketing plan for your next event. In the first portion of our panel, we will discuss some prepared questions that we have ready for the panel here. But in the later portion, we want to hear from you. Please use the Q&A feature in the webinar to submit your questions for our panelists. We have a member of our events team keeping an eye on those questions and monitoring what you have to say. So please don't be shy to ask for tips or to follow up on a particular topic that we discuss now. So now I want to go ahead and stop my screen share and invite our panelists to turn on their video, and our stage team here is going to work to pin everybody in a place where we can see them all. Hello. Awesome. We got a big group here, so we have a lot of insight. Thank you all again for logging on today and joining us and being so willing to share your expertise. I want to kick off the panel, of course, by going around kind of the Zoom space and everybody introducing themselves. So please, when I call on you, please share your name, your title, and the campus you're joining us from. And if you could also provide an answer to the question of how long you've been working professionally with social media. And from that experience, what's something that sticks out to you about the complexity or just the weirdness of it all? With no pressure, I'm going to turn to Jenny to introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Gonzalez. I'm a digital marketing and communications specialist at San Jose State University. I've been working professionally with social media since 2017, and I would say that the thing that sticks out to me about the complexity of social media is really just how quickly it changes. What engages an audience one day is definitely not the same the next, and that calls for constant experimentation. And I think that's what's really exciting about social media.
Thank you, Jenny. And then next up, I'll invite Tom to introduce himself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Emmons. I'm a multimedia coordinator for CSU Channel Islands, which just happens to be the newest of the CSUs. I've been doing social media since about 2012, but been with the CSU for about 25 years. I think the thing that strikes me the most odd and kind of strange about social media is it is constantly evolving, but in a way, it's very forgiving and very unforgiving.
Yep, that dichotomy, and
Yeah.
we're gonna dive into that a little bit right now too. So, yeah, stay tuned, everyone. And next up, I want to turn to Miles to introduce himself.
Hi there. My name is Miles Bridgewater Jackman. I work at Cal State LA, and I'm athletics media content producer here. I've been working with social media for about 4 or 5 years now. I think the thing that sticks out to me in terms of the complexity of social media is how much you have to change messaging to suit the platform you're trying to share your message on. Folks are really ready to tune in a different way depending on what platform they're logged into.
Awesome, thanks, Miles. And next up, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Olson. I am at California State University, Northridge, and I am the social media editor-writer. I have been working with social media technically since about 2007. I worked in the music industry and I set up bands' MySpace pages. Funny that Doug mentioned that. But I have been working at CSU for 5 years now in this role. So I guess that's the more professional of it. I mean, honestly, we have heard some good answers to this question already. I was thinking ahead of time that I was going to give basically Jenny's answer. And then I was like, okay, then I'm going to give Miles's answer because then he took that one. So I don't know that I have anything more to add. It's constantly changing. And, you know, like they said, like, you learn MySpace and then the next thing you know, you need to learn Facebook. So yeah, and now TikTok. So I guess I don't have anything else to contribute.
No worries. Perfectly fine to have a little bit of overlap, especially from several years of experience. And then now I want to invite Mike, last but definitely not least. So Mike, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Mike Mahi. I'm the Senior Director of Digital Media at Cal State Fullerton. And I have actually, just like Emily, been doing social since about 2008 with various other jobs, but here at the university for almost 10 years doing that. And one of the things, I like you, Emily, you guys have answered the question really, really well and haven't really left me a whole lot to drop in there. But for me, social media is a fickle friend, right? It can love you, it can hate you, it can beat you up all over the place, and but you just have to have. Sometimes I always say you have a little bit of a thick skin because what it is that we're that window for people all around the world actually to come to the university to ask us questions and to be that first conduit or that first portal for them to see what your university is all about. So. Well, it's fickle, it's there, and it's the place, for me, it's sort of like the front door, oftentimes where people just open up and they want to learn more about the university.
Awesome. Great insight to add there after saying you didn't have too much. Well done, Mike. So the reason I asked the panel that question to start is because I feel that there's a bit of a misconception over social media because it is so democratic. It's easy to set up. You can very quickly create a profile on any platform and almost immediately begin posting. But just because you're able to get started quickly doesn't mean you can effectively use it as a marketing tool right away. Nonetheless, marketing is a complete discipline onto its own, and there's intense research into it. And there's even more intense research into the overlap of marketing and social media and how to do it effectively there. So without without, scaring people too much, the purpose of this panel is really to kind of phrase our use of social media in kind of a marketing 101 framework and give some good points of entrance and departure and resources to our events professionals who might have just assumed the role of editor or media manager for a particular event or a unit on campus. So first takeaway there I'll give to the group here is, it's not as easy as it seems, and you're going to need some help. The good news is that there are professionals on your campus that are ready to do so, and we'll dive a little bit more into what that will look like now. And I think a good place to start with a good marketing campaign is understanding who our audience is, definitely for the marketing itself, but also for the event. And I'm gonna start with Tom here and ask him the first question of, can you share maybe how your digital communications team or your colleagues have worked with other colleagues throughout the university outside of communications to help find their audiences for their marketing campaigns?
Sure. I work with a writer, 2 graphic designers, and a videographer, photographer. So we meet early and often with the event coordinators, and sometimes finding that audience it's the first thing you do, obviously. Sometimes it's not so obvious, so you take what you have and then you kind of fine tune it. So my objective in those types of meetings is to fine tune what the audience is. And usually it comes right down to what is their favorite channel, where are they going to be? And there's obvious delineations among the channels of, there's a demographic for Facebook, there's a demographic for, Instagram and Twitter. Not to say you can't use all of those at the same time, but you want to pour your time and energy to where it's going to benefit you and the most. So usually what we do at that point too is we'll come up with a hashtag, right? We want to kind of build the events around the hashtag, and then we expand beyond that to peripheral hashtags where we might catch a few people on the peripheral of our own hashtag. And then from there, it's usually a writing thing. We have to have the right tone and the right message for the event. So, writing for Instagram or writing for Facebook or even writing for a press release for the event is very, very important. So once we understand that, I think we can really, really start fine tuning it. And sometimes you're dealing with not only Spanish or English, but Spanish. So, you have to think about that. And then as far as wrapping it up in terms of how we handle things, or I've handled things, is I like to engage that audience as soon as possible. And what I mean by that is we could be, 2 or 3 weeks into a design, a campaign, and we've already kind of released the information about the event. And we have this trickle in of people that are responding to us. And we want to make sure that we're not only engaging them, but we're giving them content, feeding them content that they're going to share out. And then it just kind of builds from there. So it's strategically, that's how we handle it from beginning to end.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely great insight. And I saw a couple of people kind of softly nodding their heads here. Does any of what Tom's just shared resonate with perhaps the experience that you've had on your campuses with working with other colleagues? Because I know, well, and feel free to jump off mute here. Sorry if I didn't communicate that. Because I know, well, we're good clients over in the Chancellor's office with our communications colleagues. We like to bring them in a little bit earlier than we think. I think as soon as we get a sense of what we'll be doing, we usually loop them in there and give them kind of a heads up as to some of our targeted audience. And I want to say there's a sweet spot, but I wouldn't be able to identify it in terms of how quickly you bring in your communications team into an event. But definitely you want to have some idea of what it is, and then you'll definitely want to connect with them, again, to Tom's point, helping identify where demographics live on certain platforms, and how to best reach them. But yeah, I'll check in to see if anybody else has a thought kind of on that vein. If not, I have another question ready to go, actually, of a particular example that I've heard of.
I was going to say that that's actually the right target. We bring our comms teams in really early during the process. So and helping learn what the target audiences are, who it is you're really going after, because you can spread information out all over the place and it's not going to really hit the target. So we always try to do a consult where we're saying who's exactly that we're talking to, and who do you want, what butt do you want in that seat? So works out pretty good.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
to add on that, I was just going to say that the earlier you can bring in your comms team, particularly with social media, the better. I think that it's really important. A lot of the times I've found that, social media kinds of, and I don't want it to sound like I'm calling anybody out or anything, but it tends to be like a last minute thought, right? So the thought is like creating flyers, creating this, doing these things, and a lot of emails, a lot of other types of marketing before they think of social media. And yeah, we can throw things up at the very last minute before your event, and maybe you'll get an extra person or so that'll show up because of it. But having a more strategic plan for social can really benefit your event in the long term, because we can really aim that, like they're talking about, at that target audience. We can create content that's really going to drive them to engage, and then more people see it. So the earlier that you can bring in your comms team, I personally feel the better.
Awesome.
If I could add on to what Emily said, sometimes people don't think of social media as like video and photo and graphics, right? Social media is all of that encapsulated. And so you need to give your social media team or comms team enough time to really work with people who are doing the photos and the videos to make sure that it's on brand, it's on the same tone, and that it works for the audience that you're trying to reach. And that takes time. Like Emily said, you could totally do that in like a few days, but it won't be as amazing as it could have been if you have a strategy behind it.
And to add to what you just said there is sometimes when you get those last minute requests and you push it out, that can backfire too, because then you have to say, why are you just telling me today? It could look bad for a social media group that's managing, because then it looks like they don't have their act together. So you got to be careful there.
Well, yeah, good considerations there. And I think that that's a good segue too into my next question. And this one's going to be at Jenny. Recently, San Jose State University developed a new social account on Instagram to disseminate information on just commencement. The account collaborated with other main channels on campus to answer questions and help students as they also transitioned, not just giving them kind of information about commencement ceremonies, but also as they transitioned into alumni. Can you tell us more about the project and how the different channels work together?
Yeah, of course. So during the pandemic, it was really difficult for us to communicate with our student audience. So we did a bit of an analytical audit, and we figured out that most of our audience is really, at least the student population, is on Instagram. Some of them are on Twitter, but most of them are really on Instagram, and that's really where they're digesting this type of content. And so what I ended up, not myself, but what we ended up doing with our SJSU alumni team, as well as another team member who worked on the SJSU Commencement Instagram, is we created this Instagram that was really a customer service based Instagram, where we would disseminate the information regarding commencement, graduation, anything that they needed to submit for deadlines. If they had questions, this is where they would go. And we cross collaborated among 3 social media channels. So it was the main SJSU channel, SJSU Commencement, and SJSU Alumni, because we want them to be a part of our community. We want them to feel pride. So that's what the main SJSU channel was for. The commencement one was just specific to commencement questions. Sometimes I don't have all the answers, and it was great to have somebody who knew all of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes and all that stuff that they could answer. And if they didn't, they knew who the right people were to ask those questions to. And then lastly, SJSU alumni, because we really wanted them to feel like they were on a journey with us. They still have this pride and affiliation to the university. And so what ended up happening is it created a lot of engagement for the SJSU commencement page itself. A lot of people were going directly there. Anytime I posted anything commencement related on our main channel, I would always say, make sure you're following SJSU commencement and SJSU alumni. This is really where you're gonna find more community and learn more about what the next steps are in your commencement journey and then later your alumni journey. We hosted Instagram lives with the SJSU commencement representative, and we did one with the SJSU alumni representative, and we got a lot of questions from people just really wanting to know more. And what we really learned is that, yeah, we're sending them emails, yeah, we're tweeting about this, but are they really getting this information? They really want to feel this sense of transparency and connection, and Instagram is really the place to do it. So it was great to have something for them. It was awesome to be able to let them know, hey, we weren't able to have a graduation during the pandemic for our class of 2020, but it's coming. We know you guys are eager to have it. Here's what we know. And it creates a sense of loyalty and trust that they can ask these questions to us. And even if we don't know, we come and have the answer for them. So it was great to have that. And now that we are sort of transitioning out of that, we're sort of trying to figure out where the SJSU commencement page is really going to go from now on. We do want it to be a little bit more customer service, but we also want it to live in the downtimes when commencement isn't that big of a thing, right? So it's been a great experiment, and I think it's one that we want to continue messing around with and trying to find better ways to communicate with our student audience.
I love the way that you guys leveraged each other, right? Was it just as simple as like you would just kind of privately message each other, and then like for instance, the main SJSU account would come comment under a thread on the commencement account, and vice versa. Something, am I off the mark there? Or?
No, yeah, very similar to that. So sometimes I would post something commencement related on the main channel, and I'd get a flood of messages of people saying, hey, I don't have this, or hey, I don't know what time this is at. And I would just ping our SJSU commencement representative and let her know, like, hey, you have some questions in there. Do you mind answering them? And she was really quick. She was very responsive. And we actually found that a lot of people were DMing the commencement page saying, like, basically being very grateful to have a place where they could just go and ask those questions, because sometimes those questions do get lost in the main channels. And it's good to have an extra customer service way that they can reach us.
Love that. And then to the point you mentioned earlier too about what happens to the account kind of in the in-between periods of outside the commencement season. Wondering, you know, and something that just comes straight to mind is, you know, you can continue to highlight graduates throughout that in-between time. And wondering if that's been something your team has explored before.
Yeah, so one thing that we were trying to do during our huge experimentation was utilizing user-generated content. And that was in part also because we were in the pandemic. We had to keep a 6-foot distance, and it was really hard to be able to take pictures of people on campus and things like that. A lot of our students were already doing it on their own. So what they were doing is they were sharing those photos with us. And a lot of those photos are things that I've been asking for permission to save. And so that's been a way that we want to continue sort of leveraging SJC commencement, is using that as a way to also highlight our graduates, showing how amazing they are, their accomplishments. And I mean, who doesn't love to be featured on somebody's social media? Everybody loves that. So it's definitely something that we want to explore. Our editorial team has also heavily focused on doing graduate highlights to make sure that we show what exactly are they doing once they graduate, what are their next steps. So we definitely want to continue exploring how we can leverage that and just make it a community for them to feel happy and excited that they came out of our Spartan community.
Awesome. And then kind of more of a like operational thing. How do you guys go about collecting those stories? Is it just like a post that's like, hey, we're looking for stories, DM us, or is there a form, or just for somebody? I think that's a really good strategy, and just to give people maybe as a next step to get that implemented.
All of the above.
Okay.
And we also email a lot of people. We tend to email the deans, anybody who's a professor, and we say, hey, do you know any students that might have an interesting story that we haven't heard of yet? Sometimes some of the best stories people don't really know about because they're kind of doing their thing. So it's really good to reach out to anybody and anyone on campus and let them know, hey, if you have a good story, like, let us know. We want to tell it. We want to share it. If we don't, then how are people going to know that we have amazing students coming out of our university?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll stop here to see if maybe what Jenny has shared resonates with any of the other panelists. We do have a section planned later where we'll talk kind of on a more grander scale how to source student stories, but I'm wondering if maybe just that collaboration between the different social media accounts that are at San Jose maybe struck a chord with some of the other strategies or practices that the panel here has experienced.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I think that, collaboration between different accounts on campus is so important. And I know that I'm actually pretty sure everybody that's on this panel will agree with me on that one and has experience with that as well. But I think that, going and having a good place for someone who's hands-on in commencement to be able to answer those questions is key, because I get a lot of questions on the main CSU Instagram about commencement that I just don't have the answers to, and I have to go track them down. So I think that's really good. I also just wanted to add, that another great way that we found stories is just people going viral. Somebody posting a tweet about their mom who is first generation, or an immigrant who is graduating from CSUN after, being a full-time mom and working and the whole bit, and how proud they are of that person. We've seen those go viral and be picked up by news stations as well as by us. So it's really just listening. I think listening is a huge part of social media that tends to be overlooked when we're really only focusing on what we want the consumer to actually get from us.
So I love that. So once you've gotten, and to try to summarize some of the discussion already for takeaways here, if anybody, for the folks watching, you want to find your audience, you want to bring in your communications team, and then at that point you could even leverage some of the main social accounts on the campus to give some legitimacy to your event, and then you can then in return serve as an expert on the event in case there's traffic on the main channels of folks asking questions. So part of being on such a in a campus community where there's different outlets is that you can leverage each other and for the better. So my pontification on why you should work more collaboratively with colleagues there. So I think so once we kind of have a strategy in place and we have kind of some collaborators, I think the next step is kind of to look at the materials that we're looking to post on our social channels. And one of the important things is kind of keeping those on brand with the larger identity of the campus. I'm going to put this question to you, Miles. What are some resources or tips that you frequently provide colleagues when they seek your support on social media campaigns to keep them kind of on brand, or just to elevate the quality of what they're putting together?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we have at Cal State LA is a brand style guide, which most universities have and is pretty easily accessible if you can look up the Communications and Public Affairs Department. Another thing that we actually use a lot of times too is we have a campus image bank. So like a Flickr, or we use Photo Shelter. And just getting those resources into people's hands can really help out a lot in terms of legitimizing and showing the brand through their social campaigns. So on top of that, I mean, some of the ways that we can suggest that other folks on campus start using particular ways of marketing. I mean, drip marketing is one of the ones that we use a lot. And that can be really helpful to share information about events. There's this rule of 7 idea in marketing that prospects need to hear an advertiser's message at least 7 times before they take action. And drip marketing can help with that. So, it can be social, any of the social platforms, but it can be email, it can be display boards, it can be video streaming ads if you have a video streaming service on campus. You can have your targeted prospect surrounded by the messaging that you're sharing without blasting them with it from one platform. And that person could potentially tune out that information by just simply getting off the platform for an extended period of time. And if that time overlaps with your campaign, then they don't hear your message at all. So that can be really helpful. It's also super helpful when your campaign has a lot of information to share. So you can break up what you might blast and actually just put into bite-sized chunks over time. So it can be something like telling someone that you're having an event and then telling them what it's about and then telling them when it is and who's going and, the promotion happening tonight. Tell them how to buy tickets, tell them how to engage on social while actually at the event. And then after the event's over, tell them when the next event is so they continue that cycle again.
You could also share maybe like a highlight reel of the event or some neat thing that happened, or a tidbit maybe of a guest speaker, just to keep people excited about something that happened there as well. Want to turn it to the rest of the panel to see if there's any strategies your team has provided colleagues to keep things on brand or keep it elevated that could be in addition to what Miles shared. You did do a really good job of touching both on a marketing advice and just a style brand advice as well. Awesome. No, perfectly fine. And returning again to keeping kind of content interesting, elevated. I feel a good way to do so is to feature kind of the constituents of that are benefiting from that event or that campaign, which most oftentimes is students, or maybe they're alumni, or maybe there's some other group on campus. And I'm going to pose this question here to Mike, because I've heard you had some experience doing this in terms of, what strategies do you use over at the Fullerton campus to recruit students and interesting individuals to feature in social content?
Yeah, so here at Cal State Fullerton, I think like many of you guys at various universities, you do a zillion different events. You have all different kinds of things that you're juggling around. And for us, what we found is that way back when I first started doing this here, I needed a little bit of help. So one of the things that I think you all are pretty familiar with is relationship building, right? So in order to find those students, those interesting individuals, and to kind of get the pulse of what I call the campus, we created what is a social media working group. And it started off with about 8 people and is now grown to about 72 different individuals that have some sort of social media in their job description. And that network, especially during the pandemic, has been invaluable to what we do. We keep connected. Those folks will share ideas. It used to be where everything went from my shop to everybody else, and they would just kind of follow our lead or do their own thing. Today, that group is everybody's sharing everything, and we have a really kind of not orchestrated, but a very good synergy with sharing content and stuff like that, right? So with that base, when we start doing campaigns, or we're looking for recruiting students or individuals to feature in that content space, we reach out to those groups, a lot of them with the student affairs or the provost office or athletics a lot, to get those folks to help us. And then even in the, I want to go and talk a little bit about commencement and what was interesting about that collaboration with our events team and with the alumni folks and everybody that was involved with that. What we were looking for was people to feature, right? Either before and be able to tell their stories. So through our editorial group, they started writing stories about young people that were, graduating during this pandemic time, right? So one of the things that we were looking for were students that came back from the 2020. And what eventually happened, and we got a lot of great input from our colleagues across campus. We turned out about a 2-minute video just honoring graduates from 2020 and their voices, right? And we would have never really found those folks. Well, we would have. I mean, but it would have been a little bit harder. But we found them through that process, right? So those relationships turned us on to some really, really great students and their parents talking about just how much it meant to them. They've already graduated. They've been away from the university for a year, but the idea of them coming back onto the campus and fulfilling that dream, that dream that we promised them, that they would get a graduate, diploma and to be able to go on and succeed. So it's all about relationship building across your campus and knowing the fact that each department, each division, each college has some form of social media going on, and they want to be able to share. They want to be able to share and leverage our big voice, and we want to be able to share and leverage the things that they have in their content. So I'm all about that cross sharing and really highlighting the student. One of the things that we're really into right now is student success and making sure that we highlight that through all our campaign materials, through our editorial work and stuff like that. And the thing that I'll share with you, and the experience from those collaborations. And somebody was asking about how do you manufacture influencers, and there's a couple ways to do that. But one, and Emily said this really well. Listen, right? So I'm at Commencement. We're 1,000 different things going on. People being moved and up to, but we were watching our social media, and lo and behold, somebody had a proposal, right? There was a marriage proposal, and we were able to, through the college that they were involved with, they were able to hook us up with who those people were, and we DM'd them, and I ended up writing a really nice little story and posting their Instagram feed. And what it did is it brought them, as influence into the mix, and user generated content. All I had to do was spin a little bit of their stuff and make it sound pretty, and it worked really, really well. But listening and building those relationships are the way that you go out and you find great students and great individuals to feature in your social content. And don't ever be afraid to do that kind of thing, to reach out to people as they post stuff, and because the reason they're posting is because they want you to see it. So let's reach out to them.
Definitely. And thank you for answering the question from the Q&A. And I think it's important that, maybe the word isn't manufacture, but more recruit, because all the interesting stories are out there. We work on very diverse and very interesting campuses. So they're out there. It's just a matter of kind of keeping our ear to the colleges and the various areas to identify them, or just making the call to invite them to share their story. Yeah, so definitely. I'm wondering, and like I said, we all work on very interesting, diverse campuses. Wondering if anybody else has maybe a nice story that they found on their campus to share with the group here.
Yeah, if I could chime in real quick.
Yeah.
So we've been doing a lot of user generated content, and I actually started a hashtag called Yes SJSU. So anytime any student posts something and they tag us, that means they're providing permission for us to utilize that image. So I don't have to go through the extra step of asking for that permission. But recently I was looking through the hashtag and found that a student posted, or a graduating student posted, a photo of herself with her sister. She was graduating college and her sister is entering college. So entering San Jose State, and one of them was leaving San Jose State. So that in itself was such a cute photo and a story. It was the two sisters both holding caps, and they were all saying SJSU bound, and the other one was leaving SJSU. So it was very cute, and it was great content for our end, in terms of this is something that we can repurpose twice, for commencement and for our incoming students. So that's why it's great to pay attention to what our students are posting, or even our alumni. Sometimes it's content that we can reuse.
There's all sorts of, oh, go ahead, Emily.
Sorry.
No, go.
One of the things that I always like to say is an engaged student is an engaged alumni is a donor, right? So, I mean, in the long run, how we are engaging our students on social media now can really have a lasting impact onto how likely they may be to come back to a donor event later on. So it's important to create those lasting interactions by reaching out and engaging with those students, or maybe alumni. It's not too late.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Miles.
I mean, in that way, also what you said earlier about just listening, when you listen and engage, you create a relationship between what is this standalone social media platform that people may or may not have some sort of tangible relationship with, and make it more personal. And so, one of the ways that we did that here at State of LA in the athletics department especially is just we had our student athletes a couple years ago, 2019, there was a national championship run that our soccer team took. And one of the ways that we promoted that was just by continuing to talk to and listen to the student athletes and hear what it is that they are excited about and what their goals are and their vision is, and channel that voice through our channel. But one of the other ways that we do it too is just by, putting some of those tools in the hands of the student athletes as well. So we'll create GIFs each year during a media day And basically we give them this stock of branded content that they can use. And what we have found with these GIFs that are, just fun reaction GIFs of each of our student athletes is that they reach a huge audience. One of the things that we found recently is that we've uploaded about 1,400 GIFs over the course of a couple of years, and those have had 17.4 million views. And so when you have approximately 12,500 views per GIF, I mean, I find that pretty successful, and I didn't think it was going to be as successful as it was, but it was all about putting the tools in those student athletes' hands, elevating the voices of the student athletes, and that's where we found success too.
I was going to say just one
go
more
ahead, Mike.
about that mayor's proposal. The beauty of that wasn't just that they hitched up right here on campus, stuff like that, but they met in high school. They were in the same class unexpectedly at Cal State Fullerton, and they attributed the whole thing to being here at Cal State Fullerton. So it's a matter of not only just find that great story, but how do you bring it back to the brand? And they did it for us perfectly. And it's just really a great, it was an element of storytelling that I couldn't even dreamed it up myself. But if you have that kind of low hanging fruit, man, just jump on it as fast as you can.
Did they also get married on campus?
Well, the wedding's down the road a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure you have venues for them.
Yeah, we got any place they want to do it.
That would, again, make a tremendous, and then that would tie in perfectly too. That would be the marketing for an event on campus. And it would just be the most amazing through line of that story. So yeah, but anyways, well, we look forward to seeing the post about it, Mike. Wanted to touch on the one last big important topic before we turn to some of the questions that were submitted from the audience. And in addition to featuring interesting stories, the kind of look and feel of the social media content has to be attention grabbing and interesting. That of course is the $1 million question, is how to make your content interesting and exciting on social media, which is very crowded. But nonetheless, there is a little bit of formula there. We have a little bit of understanding amongst the panel here from what we've seen be successful in previous runs. Because I'm confident she'll be able to address this in one way or the other, I'm going to turn this question to Emily. What are your tips in terms of keeping content interesting or attention grabbing?
Yeah, so I feel like I keep kind of beating the same drum, but my biggest tip is to listen, find out who your audience is and what it is that they expect to see on that channel. So for example, if you have something that is very text driven, Instagram might not be the best place for you to go, because Instagram is a very visually driven platform. And you may want to look and see who's following you, what kind of content it is that they might be expecting or what they've been engaging with in the past. Because the more engagement that you get on your content, the more likely you are to get them returning. So that's kind of how the algorithm works. And then, if for some reason you just have to tell them information and you don't have anything fun to say about it, they're already there. So the biggest thing is, listening, creating content that people will engage with, maybe asking questions or having something that people, will find interesting. And then my, final point on that is to have different content on different platforms. So you may end up creating something for Facebook that might work fine for Twitter. However, it's a different audience that you have on Twitter, and it's a different audience that you have on Facebook, and it's a different audience that you have on TikTok. So even though you may have that same information that you need to share, find a different way to share that information on all of the different platforms so that it doesn't just feel like repeat. I find that, that kind of dynamic way, it's the same type of thing with the drip campaign that Miles was talking about. You're reaching them in different places if you're reaching the same people, but also it's giving people incentive to follow your different channels, because if you're only giving them the same content on Twitter as they're getting on Instagram, then why are they going to follow you on Twitter? So I guess I hope that answered that question
No,
for you.
excellent, excellent too. The other thing I was thinking about is, well, like on some platforms like TikTok, there's like there's subcultures of trends and things that happen. Wondering if anybody here on the panel has any experience playing around with some of those trends or like meme trends, and if that's been effective one way or the other.
Yeah, we have for sure. There was a time when, I don't know, probably still going on, but where they were doing like how it started versus how it's going. And so I was able to work with our media team to find an image from the archives of our university. And they just so happened to have located an image with a graduating class from like the 60s, I think. And they were all dancing in like flower crowns. And then I posted an image right next to it of our campus now, and there were students like reading on the tower lawn. It actually had a lot of engagement in terms of like, oh, wow, this is how far we've come. But it also sparked a funny conversation that it kind of reminded people of Midsommar, the film. And everybody thought that was super cool. And I think
The flower crowns, I think.
yeah, I think, and then we're dancing around in a circle. So I think that's what made them think of Midsommar, but it created a bit of affinity for the university, but it also made them laugh about it. So I thought it was a great opportunity to not be super serious. And I think a lot of our student audience really appreciated that.
I'd like to
Go for it,
jump
Emily,
in as well. Sorry. But I think another thing that I was thinking of this while Jenny was giving such a great example is, I guess, stealing ideas from other campuses. I know that Mahi and I have a little bit of a rivalry going on that. We always are talking about doing our TikTok dance off, but it hasn't happened yet. But we definitely do a little bit of stealing or borrowing other campuses' ideas. So Jenny had a great idea there, and going and taking advantage of great ideas that you see at other campuses and obviously changing them up to meet your branding is another fun way to go ahead and create that dynamic content.
Everything's fair game once it's up on the internet, right?
I mean,
Awesome.
at Cal State LA too, one of, not myself personally, but in our communications and public affairs office, we have a couple interns who would kind of be the eyes and ears for social media part of the time that they're in here. And so myself and our communication specialist who does the social media for Cal State LA, we would interact with them and they would pitch us ideas as well to basically keep us in tune of what's going on and what is in at the moment. But part of it too is that we would also have to go through and figure out, is this in our brand? Is this aligned with what we want? But I mean, we would do things like if he is XYZ sort of thing, then he's not your man, he's X. And so we would do that with Eddie the Golden Eagle, our mascot. Or we did during like finals week, let's get this bread, and did a little play on it, and, had him actually eating some bread as the mascot. And we got a little bit of news coverage on that too. So, I mean, you have to figure out what trends work for you, but also make sure that they stay within your brand as well.
Awesome examples. Yeah, I'm gonna check out that page later. Before, I wanted to make sure we didn't miss this part too. And so in addition into keeping a close eye as to like what type of content is successful on particular platforms, I think it's also important to keep an eye towards accessibility and making sure that our content is is able to be experienced by people with disabilities in many respects. I know that the CSUN campus is leading in the area of accessibility because they have an academic unit there that focuses on this. So I'm going to turn this one to Emily again and see if maybe you have any resources or tips that you can offer us in terms of keeping social media content accessible.
Yeah, we sure do. So CSUN's Universal Design Center actually does a social media accessibility workshop for people on our campus. And lucky for everyone else, it is also online. So I believe somebody's going to put the link in the chat, but there is a webpage where you can go and see kind of the best practices when it comes to social media accessibility. Many of the platforms do have things built into them so that you can do alt tags on your photos and things like that, or it'll auto caption, though sometimes that's not always the best route to go because it's not always accurate. But there are different things that are built into the platform that you can take advantage of. You just need to kind of know where to find them. So this should help anybody who is planning on maybe starting an account or has an account and has not been really following accessibility guidelines. We do highly recommend that you take advantage of the accessibility training that is online and available for you to use.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing the tip, and the link is in the chat right now. So of course, folks, feel free to open that up or save the chat for later reference. That gets at pretty much all we've had kind of pre-scripted or predetermined for the group here. And we do have two really good questions in our Q&A pod that I'm going to pose to the group here. One is kind of talking about, well, I'll read it verbatim and then I'll try to add some context. So how can event planners keep the communications team focused on delivering agreed upon deliverables if the communications team editorial priorities shift during the promotional campaign, sometimes due to emergencies, sometimes due to more, quote unquote, more important messages or stories, which, you know, we live in a dynamic world and there's different priorities that tend to happen as well. The thing that came to my mind when I read that was, well, engage people early and underscore the importance of your event. I'll turn it to the panel here to see if maybe they have an example or maybe additional context to add to that. Go for it, Tom.
I think definitely you want to bring them in early, and also at the very least have some of those deliverables already done and scheduled, because you know everybody here I'm sure uses a scheduler, right? So you could get your communication team on board really early and say, okay, we have specific dates these things need to go out, and then regardless of whatever is on their plate, they're already scheduled. So you kind of have to be the squeaky wheel, I think, in that sense. You have to get your deliverables and have an understanding, at least with the communication team, that, you know, they're going to be delivered on time. And then if there's going to be any sort of questions about scheduling them, get them on the calendar, get them in the scheduler ASAP, because yeah, I mean, that would be a tough situation. I kind of sympathize with the person that asked that question. I hope I answered that in the context that it was meant to be asked.
Yeah, I can jump in here as well. I think that the importance here is also getting buy-in from the communications team. So our department, at CSU, we do kind of campus services. So somebody can come to us and say, hey, we want you to create this poster and et cetera, et cetera. And that is definitely something that we can do. But if you're looking for something in particular, like you're having an event and you're wanting to include it on social media, on the campus social media, or, you know, in articles or things like that, getting that buy-in and making sure that this is something that actually works with the editorial calendar for the communications team, works with the editorial calendar for the social media people, that can be really huge in making sure that you're getting what you need in a time frame that you need it. So, I mean, I've had people who have come to us like with requests for the last week of school, and we just don't have the time for it. We have way too much stuff that's scheduled in during that week. So if we can get those requests earlier and be able to say, you know, hit the social media right before that first week or that last week, and then right after, right before the event or what have you, then you may be more likely to be able to get, I guess, your needs met by the communications team.
And then I'm also thinking maybe in a worst case scenario, at the very least, you'll get kind of the consulting help from the communications team. Whether they're able to leverage their tools is the question on many variables, but at the very least, they'll be able to kind of give you some insight, help you cover some of the topics we covered here in terms of finding your audience, identifying good platforms, giving some tips on content. And then that way you kind of have a little bit of the tools and framework to execute something on a short notice, or that, you know, just comes up bubbling for your area. So yeah, appreciate everybody's insight here. We're just at time, but I do want to maybe touch on this last question we got in from the audience. Could you guys talk about using Discord in event marketing? Most of our students are spending a lot of time there. Does anybody have any experience using Discord in the panel? Is that a friendly no?
I had a student assistant who was very into Discord, but from what I understand about it, it's much more of like a chat hangout type of location than it is a social media platform. So it could feel like we are intruding by kind of butting in there. But I mean, that I think that really comes down to each campus and each area, department as to their comfort level. I mean, the similar type of thing could happen with, say, Reddit or something like that, where people are used to kind of hanging out and having these conversations about campus without feeling like they're under the watchful eye of campus. So I guess it really comes down to a comfort level on whether or not that's something that you want to foray into, but it's not something that our team has yet. Who knows?
Right. I was just going to reiterate that too, the idea that so we have an account with Reddit. We're looking into doing an account with Discord, and the idea for us in social media is just to keep that listening going, because we do a lot of crisis management as well, and there's conversations going on there that oftentimes need us to pick up on, or like I said, when different trends are happening and stuff like that. So I'm kind of in favor of being a voyeur and looking into that stuff. I'm not sure if I'm going to use that as one of my main platforms to disseminate information from the university, but knowing what the conversation is happening is paramount to what we do, because that way you kind of get the pulse of the campus and what people are doing.
Tom, you have a thought?
Yeah, we don't know everything, obviously. We've never used Discord. I had a question the other day about Reddit, whether or not we had anybody on Reddit. One very good resource, if you aren't already a member, you can join it. It's a Facebook group called Higher Ed Social. Probably everybody here knows who that is, right? I would highly recommend going there because it's a fantastic resource. People have done probably many of the things that these questions, the questions that have come up, they've probably done them. So, and it may have been answered already. So that alone would save you a lot of time too.
It's also a professional organization now. I am a member.
Awesome. And I think I got the name right in the chat, but Tom, feel free to correct me and send that off to everybody. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at time for our panel. I want to thank you all very much for logging on today, for your help in organizing today's conversation, and of course, sharing all the wonderful insight that you guys have from being very expert practitioners in this area with our group here. So thank you all very much. Right now, you're welcome to turn off your video, and our events team is going to work to kind of remove our spotlights here for everybody. Thanks again, all. So with that, I want to now introduce our next session here in terms of the, well, we saw that group discuss kind of social media and marketing specifically in general. So I now want to welcome to our virtual stage my colleague Elizabeth Bradshaw and her colleague Allison, who are going to present to us a bit of a case study on one very successful marketing campaign that they had for a series of events at UC San Diego. So with that, I want to, of course, invite Liz and Allison to our virtual stage, and our event team here is going to work to get you guys pinned right now. There you are. Hello.
Hello. And it would be really helpful if we unmuted ourselves too. I think after a whole year of virtual events and running webinars, that would be the first thing that an event professional is able to do. But we all need help sometimes. So great, thank you for joining us, everyone. Our presentation today is really in keeping with the theme of the whole session and the whole track here. So it's a team sport plus event plus marketing plus communications for the win. So I'm Liz Bradshaw. I'm an event specialist here in special events and protocol at UC San Diego. And I'm really excited to be joined by my colleague Allison Schneider, who's a senior director Director for Advancement Operations and Campaign here at UC San Diego. And so basically, we will be taking a deep dive into our series, Some Evenings of Non-Conventional Wisdom. And we'll be looking at how we can collaborate and communicate to best serve our departments, our clients, and overall our respective organizations that we are all here to support today with our events and experiences. So it doesn't need me to say again, as we've all been saying all year, that this year brought a lot of changes. And while we were unable to provide some of the in-person experiences that we really love, with some of these challenges came some really wonderful expanded opportunities to shift our focus a little bit more towards the elements of programming that really lend themselves to a virtual environment. And I'm really thinking here of a lot of digital content creation. So in certain circumstances, we were really unable to grow the audiences that we might typically reach with some of our initiatives. We found ourselves forming ad hoc different kinds of mini committees to really play and draw on the strengths of all of our colleagues in order to execute and elevate these to the highest level. And UC San Diego turned 60 this year. So each November, we celebrate our founding with a suite of events that honor significant faculty contributions, supporters of the campus, alumnus, and some of the brightest, most boundary-pushing faculty and students. As an initiative that supports the broad mission of the university, this suite of events and experiences are always a really big team effort with communications, marketing, special events and protocol, and advancement signature events at the helm. And all of our departments are a huge mouthful to say. So today we'll be looking at this series and really going beyond the event. So as event professionals, we're tasked to bring to life messaging and campus goals. And these don't have to be for one night only, but we're exploring how these experiences that can be shared again and again and provide points of engagement past the scheduled program. We'll be looking at execution from various teams on campus that put this initiative together. We can touch a little bit later on some of the successes, challenges, and what we would have done with more time and resources. And we'll happily take questions at the end. If something springs to mind, please go ahead and drop your question in the Q&A function. Bear with me 1 second, because of course I've lost my notes here. So great. So to start at the top and really talk about what the 60th anniversary meant to UC San Diego, I will hand over to Allison Schneider.
All right, thanks so much, Liz. And I apologize in advance if I have to hop off of camera here and there, because I have a three-year-old who's homesick today. So that also will explain the Mary Poppins related background noise. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage before we dive into the specifics of this event series, which is 60 years ago, UC San Diego was founded. And so this was really a milestone anniversary for the university. And we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to, there's my small child, I apologize. Go sit down, okay? We wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to really share our brand story. And so we endeavored to come up with a broader marketing and communications effort. That's mommy, yep. And so we worked with our ad agency, sweetie. Sorry, 1 second. All right, so anyways, so I'll jump, Liz, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll keep this high levels. So our goals with this marketing and communications effort really were to encourage community participation, particularly in our virtual series of events, given that we couldn't do anything in person, increase visibility, also to really highlight our preeminence as a research institution, and to instill pride in sort of where we've been and excitement and enthusiasm around where we're going as a university. Next slide, please, Liz. And so where we landed, just from sort of a creative and messaging look and feel, is this this sort of 60 icon with different sort of nice, clean imagery that we infused into the 60, and some core messaging around really kind of who we are as a university, what makes us different. And that really is about non-convention, right? It's about challenging conventions. It's about being on the cutting edge, unconventional thinking. And we wanted to sort of highlight how our history of non-convention it positions us for another 60 years of non-convention and challenging conventional wisdom. So we wanted the identity to be really flexible for a wide range of uses, audiences, interests. And so this set of iconography really kind of did some of that work for us. And it also was a nice, you'll see later in some of the event specific creative, it was something that lended itself to leveraging for specific topics. We could use this concept and in-house really build out more icons as needed. You wanna hop to the next one, Liz? So this is a bit of a snapshot of how we really kicked off our 60th anniversary celebration, which we did in November of 2020 in alignment with our birthday, our founding anniversary on November 18th. So that was really when we did a big social push. We did a birthday video where leading up to our big celebration, we called for video submissions from our community wishing us happy birthday, put that into a video compilation, used Tagboard also to highlight different people sort of sharing their shout outs with us. And then we also ran the lead story in our weekly campus newsletter, sort of sharing again with the campus community what was happening, teasing sort of upcoming events that they could participate in, because this really is a campaign that was intended to run basically the academic year of 2021. And Liz, you want to go to the next one? So we also, with the launch, wanted to develop a few different assets that we could leverage throughout the celebration. And so we decided to develop 2 different short videos, both less than 2 minutes. One that we called Founders Foresight, which was sort of about that, looking back and highlighting our foundations in non-convention, and then On the Edge of Tomorrow, which was really about that sort of looking forward piece. And so just to kind of give you a sense of the messaging, we wanted to play for you Founders Foresight. So I'll hand it to Liz to play that now.
We are like a beacon, rising up in the heart of the city, lifting spirits, serving their aspirations, and bringing reality to their ideals.
A beacon made brighter by gathering together many sources of light, a series of small universities, individual colleges, each with its own special character and academic emphasis that combined guide our path forward.
Avoiding the usual barriers between graduate and undergraduate students, fostering interdisciplinary studies and tearing down departmental walls, championing connection and collaboration.
Imagine that, an edge that isn't.
We didn't begin as an undergraduate college, then develop professional schools, but started with graduate teaching and research in the beginning, laying the roof first.
So we could attract top scholars and researchers right from the start. And you know what? They came.
Among its purposes, the university champions the finest scholarship of the past and seeks through research the knowledge to guide our steps into the future.
Guided and inspired by our founders, we're a university founded on the edge, and we continue to thrive on the edge of tomorrow.
All right, so and with that, we really felt like between that, the sort of core brand look and feel, the iconography, these video assets, that we kind of had a good foundation to continue to promote the 60th throughout the year and kind of infuse that brand into signature events where it really made sense. And so the very first events that we used to sort of launch the brand were more for sort of our closest community of donors, supporters, leaders. And so that was our what is typically our founder celebration, where we award our Revelle Medal to faculty emeriti, and we award our Chancellor's Medal to top university philanthropists and leaders. And so we used all of these assets for those, but again, that was a much tighter audience. And so we wanted to really be able to extend the reach and this look and feel and celebrate the anniversary with our entire campus community. And so that's really what the Evenings of Non-Conventional Wisdom were all about. And so throughout the winter and spring of this past year, 2021, we held 4 different virtual events. Each of them were really topical themes that we approached, sort of identifying those themes as the intersection between areas of interest and just sort of timely topics, but also areas of strength and distinction for the university and our faculty and leadership. It was, these were all free and accessible to the public, both live and on demand. We were really excited that we could reach people not just in the moment and for the sort of full recorded experience, but for all of the different video assets that we were able to produce as part of this. And we did vary the format for each event. So each event really was a distinct experience. And I think that the most important thing is really that we started with what were our core messaging and sort of communications goals, and we built the program and the event marketing strategy around that. And so with that, I'll hand it to Liz to give us a deeper dive into the making of the Non-Conventional Wisdom series.
Thank you, Allison. And I think that as large of a challenge as taking on this event series was, I think for all of us, that having that key messaging just solidified and so much kind of care, attention, and thought that had gone into it really helps, you know, as an event professional, us to really kind of think about how can we play with this and create the kind of activation that is really going to support these programming goals. And so, you know, in full theme here, we're looking at our game preparation here, and what were some of those kind of high level goals that we really kept in mind. So of course, taking that messaging that Allison had just mentioned, we really wanted to ensure that while there was a difference in format for each of those events, that there were some really key elements that we wanted to keep consistent with. And, you know, they enabled us to really use those kind of brand graphics that had been really created for the 60th though. So for each of those events, we landed on those being a series slide static in the pre-show, an animated event slide, which was unique for each event that was created, the Founders Foresight video, which is the video that you just watched. And so that became kind of our signature lead in. And I honestly really don't get bored of watching that video. I think as it was a huge team effort and we're really proud of how that turned out. The Chancellor was provided a scripted introduction for each of the events, and we had a strategic leadership welcome message as well that was also live. And then the Chancellor closed each event. And with that consistency, we're going to focus quite a lot on team members, but having consistent team members working on each of those events, I'm not sure going into it that we really realized how valuable, once the non-conventional train got moving, how valuable it was as we were really, you know, working to execute one event and also to kind of start the preliminary planning stage of another continuously, how key having those consistent team members would really be for that series. Of course, we wanted to provide an engaging virtual event to really support the messaging of the 60th, and then accessibility. And we talk about accessibility in many different ways, accessibility in terms of how people engage with the content from a logistics and physical point of view, but also accessibility as far as topics go. So while based in academia, it's really important for us to think about how we can present these topics in a way that's digestible for a layperson that might not be a faculty member, but also that's not dumbing down the topic as it's intended or the conversation. And so, you know, really striking that balance. And so really leaning on our colleagues, as I'll get into, to collaborate to hopefully execute that to the best of our ability. So it took a big village. This was, I'm hopefully not leaving out any team members, but there are a number of team members within each of these teams on campus that went into the committee that was Evenings of Non-Conventional Wisdom, both on a high level and then as we drilled down to program each event. And I wanted to give a shout out too to our external partners, which are really carefully selected. These are partners that we trust. They understand our brand and they really work very, very collaboratively with us every step of the way in order to execute both the digital content, the branding, the look and feel of the event. They work in tandem with not only our production teams, our events teams, but also our communication and marketing teams. So we really would be, you know, remiss if we didn't include them in the non-conventional wisdom family. And we really actually kind of missed them a little bit when the series was over, I'm not gonna lie. Great, so to begin with, as far as taking a look at how we put the program together from a collaborative standpoint, while an Evening of Non-Conventional Wisdom is usually an annual signature event, the move to a series format and the event being all virtual, we had the ability for an expanded audience and really looking at breaking the mold of how we typically approach the program. And this really called for a lot of flexibility throughout the process. So we started, as any good event would and any good series would, with bringing all of the players together for a large, great group brainstorming. And I think we had at least 30 people on that first meeting, which was no small feat. So really to review the overall goal of the 60th messaging, as Alison said, to identify those high-level topics, to explore the format options. So what are some of those cool formats that we can play with that might lend themselves to digital that actually might in turn inform who's a speaker and you know who we're working with, because they might have something cool and interesting and engaging to show. And then really identifying and kind of drilling down who are those smaller core teams that we're going to really work very closely together on the day-to-day aspects to execute these series. And so our goal today is not to go too much into the logistical aspect of how we produce the events, but I must say that we are really proud of the end product of these events. Shameless plug, you can watch any of the events and all of the content produced on YouTube, and I think the link's already been posted in the chat. And a big shout out to Adrian McCraw, who is on the executive committee for CSU-UPN and was also one of the event leads on this program, and an absolutely integral part of how everything was put together. So we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive into some of the high level action items as we're programming the run of show for the event, and how these involve these different players at each step of the way, how they helped inform some of our decisions and why these things were really important. So we've talked quite a bit now about program identity. So the sort of three-pronged advancement communications, like executive communications and central university communications team had come together to really execute on the boilerplates and solidify the topics for each of these events and provide us as our event team and event leads with all of these pieces. So from then we took these event concepts and the blueprints of the event and we formatted them. We looked at some of our ideas for formatting, you know, what we think might work, what might resonate with the audience, whether we're looking at doing digital content, or it's a panel discussion, or it's some straightforward presentations with some slides. And once we've solidified, and I could probably spend about sort of 30 minutes honestly going into that process of drilling down to the right people, but I wanted to look at the featured guest invites. So as event leads, the event invites and participation invites, they came from the Chancellor. but it was really a three-pronged effort to put these invites together. We worked with our lead advancement writer for the entirety of the series, and she was an integral part of not only reaching out to really help us build that relationship with faculty in a way that really spoke from a communications angle on why we felt it was important to for them to participate, you know, the ideas that they were sharing, how that really supported the mission of the university, how we wanted to highlight the importance of the work that they're doing. And so we felt that having that professionally written piece from the advancement writer really helps hone that relationship. And it was important for us to communicate through our advancement writer the right kind of information so that our faculty presenters and guests, as we would call them, weren't surprised by any of the items that we were asking of them, which was actually fairly involved as we get into the series. And so once we had all of our faculty members on board and our lead moderators, we went into some player meetings with featured guests. So we had kickoff meetings, midpoint meetings, and tech rehearsal meetings. And why these large kickoff meetings were important is we really invited our guests. We invited their communications directors. We had our executive communications directors and campus communications as well, because what we really felt was very important was that we had the skeleton of a format for the program, but we wanted to listen. We wanted to listen to our featured guests as they were the ones that are highlighting, you know, what are some of the key areas that could really inspire conversation between them, could inspire kind of dynamic content that we could then go on to produce, and a really interesting flow that was going to be engaging to our audience. And so that's really why those key people were really important. And those meetings were really important to then lead us into our content development and production. So our run of show, which was an ever-evolving document that I'll get to in a minute, with some live event scripting. And really that was our event leads, our communication leads from all areas, subject area or executive communications. We really leaned on those heavily. And you know, as we developed the content, we kept firmly in our minds, how do we get the most longevity, the widest use, and honestly, the most bang from our buck from these elements? Because sometimes if you're working with a professional video company, you know, they're not necessarily cheap to produce. So you can see here some behind the scenes footage and screenshots of some of the interviews we conducted for our Women in STEM event. For this event, it was especially important to us not only to ask questions during the event, but to really tell the stories visually and with their voices of the women that we were highlighted, because we really had some prominent women. The Executive Vice Chancellor of UC San Diego, Elizabeth Simmons, played a really essential role in the whole event. She was our moderator for the event and one of our featured women. So from a program perspective, as the top woman academic on our campus, we'd be really remiss if we didn't highlight her and celebrate her and her journey as part of this programming. It was imperative that these videos from a viewer standpoint not only be really woven into the fabric of the narrative of the event, inclusive of the scripted remarks and panel questions, etc., but could stand alone as mini documentaries. And actually, we had so much great footage that came out of these videos that we made the case and went back to our leadership and said, this is too good not to create long form documentaries on. So on our YouTube channel, you can actually see not only the videos as part of the event, you can see the short form mini profiles, and then also longer form. Pradeep to Ghosh, who you see in the middle, I think her video is 18 minutes long. So if you really want to dive into her journey, which is fascinating, then the opportunity is there to do so. We worked closely not only with our external video production team, but our key executive communications writer, who was a massive piece and a massive player in the event series as a whole, because and then we worked with each woman featured and the specific communications directors and writers for each area. So our writer, and the reason our writer was present at all the recordings is we were really leaning on her for not only helping us kind of format the flow of the program, but scripting executive communications remarks. So she was scripting the communications remarks for the chancellor. And then she worked with the EVC's writer to also script the questions for that. And, you know, something that we found, and I'm sure everybody has found in many of these virtual events, which are very heavily content driven, is that they need to be absolutely scripted to the like nth degree in order to get that kind of very comfortable and flowy conversation that you're looking for on the audience end. And so we really, I can't stress enough how we leaned on our team of writers, and I'm not sure how much any of us expected that would be the case going into it, but it was certainly a relationship that we delivered. And then I'll quickly give a mention to our climate event in April and our border event in May, because this is where the addition of our campus area communications directors became invaluable. We had broken the climate event down into chapters, and we wanted to include a short video, a sort of 90-second video, to kind of kick off each one of these chapters and really serve as a jumping off point for the conversation. And so our communications directors delivered, and the turnaround honestly on this was really scary, but they delivered everything from raw existing footage that they were planning on using in like a YouTube series that hasn't even been created yet, to a video that had been made in conjunction with the BBC. And then our trusted video team supplied any filler stock needed. So we provided a brief to not only our guest presenters, but the communications directors, and worked with them to write a 90-second script for each video, which they produced a voiceover to accompany. And I think because of how this event came together, we turned that around in about a week, which I don't recommend. And then in May, when we turned our attention to the border, we really were able to leverage an existing presentation. So you'll see here on the screen, Teddy Cruz and Fauna Foreman, which were two of our featured guests, and they work on this amazing project on UC San Diego called Community Stations. So they have a very honed presentation already. And rather than just have them present the presentation, we really felt that it was important not only to the event itself, but to their project, to create a video that was based on the presentation, or utilizing the video footage, the photos that they had, and the script that just needed a tiny bit of tweaking to create and take what was a 10-minute presentation down to around a 4-minute engaging video. And now this video is something that not only is a standalone piece, again, that you can watch, but can be used by both them as they go out and fundraise, and also their communications team. So you can see that all of this content was really strategically produced to enhance the conversations between our guests live at the event. And everything was scripted in a way that the videos became a jumping off point for the topics that were touched on after. So while not groundbreaking in any kind of innovation in our methods of collaboration, honestly, an event concept hosted on Google Sheets became really our like blueprint, Bible, whatever you want to call it, our collaborative main tool. It has notes from the meetings with our featured guests, work in progress run-in shows, work in progress scripts and remarks, links to resources, media, everything else we might need in order to bring together this engaging program. And so we really shared it with the team, and it allowed us not to get hung up on waiting for responses to emails and meet our deadlines. I will add that our average turnaround time for the content for each of these live events was around 3 weeks. So with all that said, as we are putting together the content for these events, our colleagues over in marketing and communications are busy working on the strategy for putting some virtual bums on seats. And for that, I will turn back over to Allison.
I like that, virtual bums. Good. Um, yeah, so because we really were trying to reach sort of the public at large, our audience, our potential audience size was really large. Students, faculty, staff, alumni, donors. And we did want to reach as much of our community as possible, but without over communicating. So one of the things that we did, you know, in as sort of an addition on top of those sort of launch promotions that I shared that were really kind of about sort of getting people primed and excited for what was to come with the anniversary. But we did sort of series related email campaigns, so where we would sort of talk about what was coming up at large, tease all of the upcoming events, and those emails would go out to a much wider audience, and then we would do more targeted follow-up email communications that were more event specific to more targeted audience groups, which I think was really effective in making sure that somebody who we know probably does have an interest in climate because they're already a donor to Scripps Institution of Oceanography, we can make sure that they are really aware of what's coming up, but somebody who maybe just wants to know what's going on at UC San Diego and is sort of generally interested also hears about the events coming up. So yeah, so our key outreach tools, I would say, were email, but also using Google targeting and digital remarketing, so that if somebody had sort of clicked and shown some interest, we could show them an ad at another during an experience on another site, sort of remind them to come back. And of course, yeah, leaning on campus leaders and partners, I think, is another important point that, you know, while certainly marketing channels are our friend, so are people as sort of amplifiers of our message. And particularly, I mean, we were working with, you know, faculty and academic and university leaders who are so well respected and so well connected in their fields. So for them to, you know, use their own social channels, to use their own personal outreach was another really important tool, which I think is always the case with these sorts of things. Just in terms of our sort of general marketing approach and our game prep for that, we really did want to, you know, move people from sort of through that cycle of awareness, engagement, and hopefully ultimately to registration. And the point I wanted to make here, because again, like Liz said, there's nothing super revolutionary here, innovative in the channels we were using. I mean, this is just sort of your standard, you know, marketing funnel. But I think what's worth noting is that because we really rooted the series in the sort of core institutional brand and the 60th anniversary brand and messaging, just the act of reaching an audience, of generating awareness for these events was a value add to the brand at large. So marketing the series, even if somebody didn't click through, they didn't ultimately register, they didn't ultimately attend, it was sort of already a success from just a visibility and awareness standpoint, particularly because on these sort of topical areas where we wanted to make sure people know that we're a leader in public health, we're a leader in climate, we're a leader in, you know, as a you know, a binational region on the border with Mexico. So if Liz, you want to hop to the next one, just wanted to show this is an example of one of our creative assets. So this is a digital ad. This is the kind of piece that would have been used in the remarketing effort. So if you're, you know, you clicked on something, then you're shopping for shoes later, suddenly, you know, we're stalking you. But again, it's just really kind of simple and eye-catching, reinforcing the brand again. Liz, if you want to go to the next one. We did have a dedicated website for the 60th anniversary, and that was really our primary landing page for all of our marketing efforts, which promoted all of the sort of 60th related assets again, and then also promoted each of the individual events. And then from there, when folks would click through the registration process from here, they would sort of get into that cycle. If you want to go to the next one, Liz. These are just examples of social media promotions for the events. And again, what I really like about this is that I think that it really was a engagement opportunity, a sort of timely and topical news item. This is a great example. This was our fear factor, mistrust and vaccines panel, which we did in February, which was, right before the wider public was really had access to the COVID vaccine. And so we were able to present an event, but also put our experts out in the sort of social media marketplace as people who are sort of thought leaders in this space and could provide unique perspectives on vaccines and mistrust at a moment when that was obviously particularly relevant in the news. And yeah, so over to you again, Liz.
Thank you, Alison. And we've got our virtual bums on seats now. And we were, really overwhelmed, especially with the outreach, especially for, the first event being such a timely topic. We had sort of great audience reach and participation and really nice retention, really nice retention rate throughout the event. We actually did see, as we were watching the events, the audience participation number grew rather than dropped off. And I think that was true for every event. So we are pretty happy about that, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so sort of back to our team players, just a quick nod to game day, because really, our events leads, both myself and Adrian were leading the charge on event day after all of this major supportive work had been done and all the work had been done to create our content and really thoughtfully put together our program. But for some of the events, we did leverage a question and answer, live question and answer as part of that event. And specifically for our Women in STEM event, our moderator and host, EVC Simmons, she was presenting and moderating live from the studio, as were, you see here, we have 3 moderators in that wonderfully set up studio presentation that we had there. And so what we felt was really necessary was to have both the event and communications people on the hand there to really be there as support for our moderators in case there was a really interesting question that came through, or one of our panelists gave, a really amazing answer that we thought could be explored a little bit more fully. That's where we really were taking on that role of kind of live TV producers, to be perfectly honest with you, for that virtual event format. So I wanted to kind of give a quick nod to that. And then again, moving on, post-event, so the replay, the highlights, and looking beyond the event, and we can kind of talk a little bit more to this after, but from a team player perspective, we again kept bringing all of these folks in so we could really leverage this content that we created past the event. And so that took our event lead, again, our communications team, our advancement writer, who'd been really imperative in not only creating those writing pieces for our faculty, but for also creating our email marketing campaigns, both pre-event and post-event too, to make sure that those links were out there. And in some of our events, we actually collected questions during the event, and then we turned it into a news story. We turned it into a news story post-event to kind of keep that engagement going, and facilitated through Alison and her team, really facilitated getting some of those key questions answered from some of our panelists. And then we followed up with that in a newsletter. So that was another really great way that we could kind of keep in contact with this audience that we'd created and developed throughout the course of the program. And Alison, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to that post-event communication and some of our kind of YouTube videos that we have featured on our channel.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the main takeaway here is that I think throughout the event creation process, we were really thinking about, and we were sort of agile in responding to opportunities for content creation. So we weren't thinking about we were keen to sort of break down the walls around the virtual event, right? Because we could, I mean, in a physical event space, it happens in real time. It's not the same experience to watch the recording than it was if you were there with your canapé and your glass of wine. And so we just sort of throughout the process thought, okay, well, we're creating content. we have the potential to extend the life of this. And so we're kind of calling this the long game. So all of the video assets that we developed, we created a YouTube playlist, shared out with all of our relevant communications and development folks. I've heard directly from multiple development officers that the videos that we created throughout this series were helpful in donor conversations, which is pretty amazing, just sort of from the advancement standpoint. And I know that this was useful for our media relations and communications professionals as well. And I did really love that the story that we ended up doing with the Q&A from the vaccines and mistrust panel, because what happened was we ran out of time a little bit in the live format, but we also knew from the overwhelming response, I want to say almost 1,000 people registered for that event, that this was just something that our community cared about. And so we used that as an opportunity to run in our campus newsletter again, to just share this useful information and again, put forth our faculty as the experts on a timely topic. So the results, I think that what I hope you'll take away from this is, again, that because these events were really rooted in a larger marketing and communication strategy, where just sort of awareness of the 60th and sort of what it stood for were of value, that even though the funnel ended up in, apologies for the background noise, even though the funnel ended in only 1,500 attendees, which is still pretty darn good, that top level of reach really did have value for the institution. That awareness and visibility were core to our overall goals for this larger event. And I think it's worth noting too that 1,500 actual event attendees was still quadruple what we would have had for this event in person in a normal year.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Alison said, I mean, typically our one night only non-conventional wisdom event, we typically get around 300 attendees it's a very, very targeted audience of donors, high-level friends of the campus, targeted faculty, alumni, etc. And so we really kind of were able to not only broaden our audience, we were able to feature more faculty, feature more ideas, feature more topics over the course of this series. Not that I want to talk ourselves out of great budgets, but our budget was less for a series of 4 events than it was for one in-person event. So I think that is something, that is really not to be sniffed at. And what I am really excited about is how can we take some of these sort of, really great pieces of what we experienced, learned through this collaboration with all of our teams, through really kind of leveraging the messaging of the 60th. How can we really expand on that to create and move forward and use some of these pieces to inform how we execute our events, this series in the future and our future events, and really lean on our partners to get that cool, engaging content, and go nuts with the digital programming as we move into hybrid events and some still virtual events in the future. And I think what I just wanted to quickly share, and our marketing manager that unfortunately couldn't be with us today added these, and it's really nice. A couple of really nice mentions that we had from our Associate Chancellor for UC San Diego about the series, and also a really nice note from one of our not only hosts, but the director of Scripps Institute in Oceanography. And the reason that we've included both of these messages that we received, that we were very grateful to receive, it meant a lot, is because they both mention kind of the effort and collaboration between a number of teams that really went into pulling these events off. And I think, if anything, that is my huge takeaway, is that, my eyes of, we're aware of, and we work with our marketing team and our creative team, but I feel like this on a personal note is really the most I've ever leveraged, and it's probably the most that Alison and our executive writer Cheryl has ever seen Adrian and I, honestly, and ever wrote with us. And so that in order for us to execute those smooth programs that partnership is 100% invaluable. And so, yeah, I think we will take this opportunity to bring Sam back in, because I know he's had some great questions, and see if anybody else also has any questions for us.
Awesome. Hi, ladies. Wow. The thing that just keeps sticking out to me is the tremendous amount of work that this is. Wow. So while I try to wrap my head around that, I'll pose you guys a few questions here, and related to kind of this collaboration. This is I don't, at least in the CSU, I haven't seen something quite at this scale that isn't really driven by something enormous, like a comprehensive campaign or from leadership. You guys mentioned that you ultimately ended up figuring out quite a good team between your different communications arms and your events team. But I'm wondering, you know, was there a larger driving force that helped bring those two groups together? Was it coming from leadership? Was it other strategic priorities that were making it happen, or were you guys just kind of committed to something and then you just had to do it at some point? I wanted to get maybe some background as to some of the forces that maybe led up to this event and the really big collaboration that you guys mentioned.
Do you want to go first, Allison? That's a great question, Sam.
No, it's a fabulous question, and I think that, and I do think there were a few factors. I think leadership was really committed to not letting this milestone pass without ceremony just because of the pandemic. And I think that there was an acknowledgement that because, you know, we couldn't sort of do the big in-person fanfare, particularly all in November, which is when we would normally do this, that there was an opportunity to sort of extend the life and the reach of this to wider audiences. And so I also think that it's one of those things where until you do it, you don't necessarily know like how massive of a staff investment it is. So it's one of those things where, even though, as Liz mentioned, like our bottom line budget for like tangibles was lower, I think our staff resource time was probably net higher. And so some of that's just like it's not visible until it happens. But I do think it's also worth noting, sort of to the investment, that we are in a comprehensive campaign. I think that's part of why in my role, I'm the lead communicator for advancement, and I manage the central team of creative and communications professionals that support our fundraising efforts, working with all of the different advancement and university units. And so because we are this year, in fact, is our last year of what will hopefully be a $3 billion campaign, I think that there was more interest in really engaging our donors and alumni, really elevating that visibility. So the staff commitment, advancement, I think, was more involved in this than we would have been in just sort of your average year, because it had a real purpose at the end in terms of sort of fundraising and engagement.
Yeah, and I think there was too a really almost organic, there was a very organic, constructed organic method to the way everything came together for the program, right? Because we are executing a number of firsts. You know, it's the first time we've done a series. It's the first time it's been all virtual. It's the first time we're tackling this many topics. It's the first time where, you know, the team is truly this big, that we're putting the event together. And I think some of it was that emerged as we were working on developing the content and scripting the first event. It really became clear how key this development was. And so, you know, as we were looking from the first event where it was less content heavy, and we did pre-record 2 presentations, but we knew going into Women in STEM that we wanted to go all out and produce these kind of docu-series events, as docu-series videos as part of the events. So we were really thinking, okay, so who do we have? Like, who do we have at our disposal? This is me, like Adrian and I, who do we have at our disposal that we can, you know, really leverage and reach out to, and that's already involved in the series, but can maybe take on a slightly bigger role. And so those roles kind of grew and grew. And I would say kind of as we went on, we kind of we fell into a rhythm of, you know, those of us that were doing the run of show, developing the content, writing the letters to faculty, doing the executive scripting, and also kind of our mini team for each event of like how we were really leveraging all of our communications directors, all of the assets. And so it sounds like a lot, and it was a lot, because honestly, you know, we always had way too much. And so how do we kind of bring that down and distill it and highlight the best parts?
Mm-hmm. And then that brings up another question. Kind of looking back, well, one thing that sticks out that you said earlier, you said you produced one of these in 3 weeks, which is just, again, mind-boggling, because you know, sometimes it takes 3 weeks to put together a good meeting, but with a lot less deliverables. Wondering, looking back, is there anything you guys would do differently? Was it something about the timing of these? Was it, you know, and it's inevitably going to be a little bit rough if it was the first time kind of at this stage, but anything, you know, knocking on wood, that, you know, if this gets revisited, something that would be done differently and better?
Yeah, there were a bunch of things that I think went really well and were great, but I think one of the biggest things was, I think we didn't have a single clear owner. So like the downside of the team sport analogy here is, I think that like we also had lots of coaches and lots and lots of players. And so it wasn't always clear sort of like, what is the single point of decision? You know, who is sort of deciding how we're moving this forward? Who has ownership? And so ultimately it ended up sort of being, you know, it was Liz and Adrian and I and the executive communications person. And some of that was just sort of out of necessity of like, it's got to get done. We're going to make the decisions. We're going to elevate choices to leadership so that we can just move on. And I think that having established that, made those decisions earlier because of the newness of the program and the new territory, I think that that would have helped us get farther ahead of the production timelines, because we did sort of get caught up in the decision making and is that you, is that me, you know, because like this isn't really my day job, but you know, so that's what I would say was my big learning.
Yeah, and there was definitely there was real timeliness to the topics, right, as well. And so while that is as a learning institution, we have a need to be very responsive to, you know, being mindful that we weren't programming the events and the topics really so far out that we sort of found, you know, that there was the world is crazy and things happen that are outside of our control all the time. Pandemics, we have elections, we have, you know, natural disasters. And so we were very cognizant of the fact that we didn't want to be too far out in the choosing of these topics, so they weren't timely and we couldn't respond. But then, right, you have to kind of balance that with the being able to kind of program and put together the event in itself. And, you know, it's really important to us. The event is non-conventional wisdom. So we're not looking at, we're looking at literally being on the edge of tomorrow. And so, you know, it's definitely kind of striking that balance. And then something else that I will say is we have like this giant laundry list of formats and ideas that we put together around something like this. And so, you know, had we had all of the time in the world, all the staff in the world, all of the resources in the world, could we have come up with a cool podcast that was you know, ran in conjunction with this series? So you have your event, but then you have your non-conventional wisdom podcast, and maybe you take a deeper dive into some of those topics, and maybe you select one of the presenters and you really explore, you know, like something you've drilled down to like more fully, and then, you know, that becomes part of your integrated kind of experiential campaign for the event. So yeah, we had a million ideas like that, you know, who knows, maybe we'll get to kind of leverage in the future.
Well, that actually sets up my next question that I had. That last one was kind of backward looking. This one's kind of forward looking. It seems like you guys have kind of really tapped into a secret sauce here with being able to collaborate so effectively across units and kind of like wrenching out all these really good ideas out of like a very productive research campus. wondering if there's any plans, even tentative, to kind of keep some of that collaboration going, and maybe what's on the horizon. And I apologize, we're running real close on time, so concise answers get a gold star.
Yes, in fact, this fall for our upcoming Suite of Signature events, we're really going through a similar process, working with our agency of record, Vitro, coming up with kind of an overarching creative concept and theme that we'll then be able to sort of activate through our signature events and communication strategies. And next fall, we'll be doing the same with our campaign close.
Excellent. Nothing to add to that, Liz? Allison
really wanted to get my gold star.
Yeah, I mean, just that, from a kind of like drilling down to a specific event point of view, I'm really excited about the doors. I feel that this has opened for me. I don't know if Allison and Cheryl feel the same, but just, it's sort of a greater understanding and of the campus as a whole, how things come together, the workings. And yeah, as we move, like I look towards a building opening in the fall, that is going to kind of ladder up to this greater campaign of a sort of destination focused campaign that Allison's working on too. So yeah, we can really kind of look at the building blocks that we've created here and how can we utilize those moving past just virtual, but to everything. I feel like all cards are on the table.
Yeah. Awesome. Good place to be.
Yeah.
And with that, I want to thank you guys so much for putting together this presentation, sharing all the insight. Of course, you guys, as you shared in your presentation, you wear a lot of hats, and one of them, of course, is mom. And I appreciate the additional guest co-presenter popping in.
I appreciate your understanding.
That's one of my favorite things about the work from home is we all, there's no longer need to show off your kids' pictures. We know what they look like now.
Yep,
they join
exactly.
our meetings. I think that was a wonderful addition on my part. So with that, ladies, I want to thank you guys so much. And I want to invite back to our virtual stage our friend Chris to close out today's session.
Thank you, Allison and Liz. That was a really great presentation. San Diego State's getting ready to celebrate our 125th anniversary, so we will be in touch. And Sam, thank you for moderating yet again another wonderful conference for us today. So I'm going to close out today's program by just teasing the content for next week's sessions and providing a few important reminders. So day 4 of our summer series, which is July 29th, we'll explore a topic that has been on everyone's mind, post-pandemic events. I know we're in the process now of planning some ourselves. So next week's session will be an interactive combination of presentations and group discussions. So we're going to explore the top concerns with the return to in-person events. We know there are many. So we'll learn about some of the in-person events that our colleagues are planning or have recently hosted, and we'll exchange ideas and strategies for planning successful in-person events in the coming months. Then, after the session, we'll have the annual CSU-UC award ceremony. So please join us for a chance to recognize and celebrate fellow event professionals who have served the network in extraordinary ways. Personally, I'm honored to be able to be the person who will announce the recipient of the Founders Award. So we hope you can join us. So we encourage you to post anything you'd like to post about your takeaways from today and reach out to network members to make new friends on CSU-UC social media outlets. So finally, representatives from our sponsors are available to meet with you in our virtual exhibit hall until 2:30 today. Links to join the booths, Ginny just put those up in the chat. So don't miss the unique opportunity to connect with them. One last heartfelt thank you to our sponsors. Your support and participation has certainly elevated this year's conference, so thank you. And with that, thank you for logging in. And to today's session, a recording will be posted on the CSU-UC YouTube channel, and a link shared with you with the network shortly. So have a great day. We hope to see you next week at the last session of our summer series.